Um, Now, please welcome first to the stage Brian David Johnson, Chief Futurist, Intel. He is part engineer, part designer. He looks 10 to 15 years into the future to provide requirements for Intel's platforms. He'll look at the future of work and how science fiction may get us there. Woo!
Exactly. I should always bring you in so you can do the sound effects. So, good morning, everybody. I think it was very funny and also very wily of Philip and the WORKTECH folks to program me. I often get programmed on the same bill with Sherry Turkle, who I'm a huge fan of. I'm going to start my timer to make sure we're on time. I'm a huge fan of Sherry and Sherry's work. But usually I'm sort of, she's the human one, and I'm always brought in as the futurist, the one who's here to talk. And especially if you look at what Sherry and especially Nigel were talking about, where they're saying, change is taking place, change is coming, we need to, there's a warning, things are coming, things are changing, we need to have caution, we need to prepare. Now welcome to the second half of the morning, which is your futurist who says, change is coming. Awesome! As you can tell by my slide, which is a bunch of space stations talking to each other. So I want to walk you through this morning sort of what I do as a futurist, how I kind of think about the future and design 10 to 15 years into the future, and then very specifically talk to you about some of the things that I'm seeing, and then do a little exercise around the future of work and how science fiction kind of helps us get there. So my first slide says that I work for a large company and we have a lot of lawyers. Excellent. You're all witnesses, I did that. So one of the things that we need to do when we're designing, I'm very much an engineer, I'm incredibly pragmatic, so I need to come up with an actionable vision for the future. So when we have a vision for the future, this is what we are typically shown, right? In advertising, in movies, where we see things like this, right? We've got a good-looking guy or a good-looking girl, really cool technology, really modern apartment. This is the vision of the future. I hate this vision of the future. I think this is intellectually dishonest. Now, I can say this because this came from Intel, which, as you can imagine, doesn't make me a lot of friends in the marketing department. But there it is. Because when I look at this, I ask myself, where are the baby toys? Where are the pillows? Where are the pictures? Where are the things that make us comfortable, the things that make us human? Now, on my next slide, I have a vision and a picture of what the future is really going to look like. Who would like to see it? Oh, you were all so polite. I was giving a talk once to about 600 undergraduates. And I'm there, I'm the futurist, they're our future, we're talking about the future, it's going to be great. And I say, who wants to see the future? And I get one kid way in the back who goes, sure. I'm like, you're our future. That's what I get. Sure. Okay, hold on to something. Here we go. Bam! Now, for Intel, this is an awesome future. And actually, for the future of work, this is an awesome future. She has a laptop, a smartphone, a connected TV, and even a connected picture frame. But what I love about this picture is this is reality, right? It's filled with the stuff. It's filled with the mess, the sort of the things that sort of Sherry talks about. Our lives are complicated, and this is the type of future that I want to design for, a future that's designed for humans. I don't want to design and live in this future because this future looks like prison. I want to be in this future, because this future looks really comfortable. Okay, so how do I do that, right? Again, I'm an engineer, so we have to have a process. So what we have is something called future casting. And future casting uses social science, computer science, statistical science, and then I kind of travel all around the world kind of talking to people about the future, and we kind of develop what this future might be. If you remember nothing about my speech today, please remember, I do not make predictions. Invariably, I'm glad we're not having Q&A, because invariably in the Q&A, some joker goes, what's Intel's stock price going to be? I don't know. If I knew that, I'd be rich. No, what I do is I use future casting, which is a process to get us there. It's a process to model what it will feel like to be a human in the future, and then a process to get us from today to that point, to kind of get out in front of ourselves, if you will, to go out to 2021, 2022, even 2025 and say, This is what it will feel like to be a human, and then to turn around and do backcasting, and to use a process to get us there. And so I always like to use this quote from Isaac Asimov, who's a big hero of mine, that says, "Predicting the future is a hopeless, thankless task, with ridicule to begin with and all too often scorn to end with." Which I think it's very good to think of it like that, because for me, the future casting work that I do is all about coming up with a vision that we can then go and build. So what will it feel like to live in 2021? So this is the work that I've been doing. The first thing is a little bit of data. As we move from today to the year 2020, the size of meaningful compute power approaches 0. Now, if there are any geeks in the room, they have goosebumps on their back of their neck. It's my geek slide. If you don't have goosebumps right now, okay, you're probably not a big geek, and that's okay. You're going to have a very good and rich and happy life. I'm a geek. This gives me goosebumps, because what this means is that the size of meaningful intelligence approaches 0. We can put intelligence, we can put computational intelligence into anything. We can turn anything into a computer. So for all the decades that we've been doing this, we've always asked ourselves, can we do it? Can we make the computer small enough? Can we put it on the lap? Can we put it in our pockets? Now we have to ask ourselves, what? What do we want to do with it? Again, right? We can't be passive. We have to have a vision for what we want to build. So what do we want to do with it? How do we want to work, and where do we want to put that intelligence? So as we look out to 2020 and 2021, what does it mean? Well, one of the things that we've been looking at is something that we call the secret life of data, which you'll hear me talk a little bit more about a little later on in the presentation, which is pretty much what it will feel like to live in the era of big data, right? It'll feel like data has a life of its own, because we're creating all this information about ourselves and about our companies and about the work that we do. It goes off into the cloud, and you'll have algorithms talking to algorithms, machines talking to machines, and this is a good thing. But data will have a secret life. But what we have to remember is, even though it's going out there and doing all of this really awesome work, data is only meaningful when it comes back to people. When it makes our lives better, it makes us more productive, it connects us to the people that we love. The next area is something I like to call the ghost of computing, which is kind of this idea of what happens when computational power gets so small that the devices that we have all around us, get ready for it, this is the big animation, disappear. Right? That's worth the cost of the entry right there. So as we begin to develop the future of work and workplaces and how we will live, how do we architect those when we're surrounded by computational intelligence? So when it's literally in the tables and the chairs and the walls, in our clothes, and also in laptops and desktops and phones. What does that work environment look like when you are essentially working inside of a computer? How does that change the services? How does that change the way that employees interact with each other? Then the final bit is, actually has nothing to do with technology at all, which is something that I'm quite passionate about, is because when I go around the world talking about the secret life of data and the ghost of computing, which have kind of scary connotations to many people, we do have a lot of fear. And for me, I'm an optimist. I am a dyed-in-the-wool optimist, which sometimes doesn't make me a very popular futurist, but it's true. I think the future is going to be awesome because we're going to build it. And it's our responsibility to do that. But it's also our responsibility to look at what we're frightened of, to look at the reservations that people have and address them. And figure out, what do we need to be afraid of? What do we need to be cautious about? And then also what we don't need to be cautious about. And then separate those two, and then actually use the sort of engineering mindset to be able to take those things that we should be worried about and then actually go and use technology to help us fix them. Because for me, technology is a tool. So all of these things lead me to this quote, which again, this is another geek test of mine. This is our CTO, who is basically the uber geek, right? He is the geek of all geeks. He's the geek of 100,000 geeks. He comes from supercomputers, right? He's also a very nice guy, our chief technology officer. And he said this to me last year, that science and technology have progressed to the point where what we build is only constrained by the limits of our imagination. That we've gotten to the point, especially if you think as compute moves to zero, we can pretty much do anything. So what we have to do is engage our imaginations to figure out, okay, what do we do with all this, and what is that future that we want to live in? So what do we need to use? Well, one of the things that we've used is science fiction. We have something called the Tomorrow Project, which is actually science fiction based on science fact, to give people a language to have a conversation about the future. What kind of future do you want? What kind of future don't you want? What do you want to avoid? And what's really great is that if we have science fiction stories around technology or science fiction stories about synthetic biology, if you give it to somebody and they read it, then you can have a science-based, fact-based conversation about the future, even if they don't have that expertise. It gives us a way to have these conversations, which is the whole goal of the Tomorrow Project. The Tomorrow Project is really there to use science fiction to have these sort of fact-based, science-based conversations. And then also, we actually have conversations. Imagine that. Sherry would be very happy if she was here. I actually sit down with people on camera, and we talk a lot about the future. What do we want, and where do we see things going? So my last little bit of time, I want to kind of walk you through this sort of thought experiment around the future of work. So, we're looking out to the year 2021, 2022, even 2025 sometimes, thinking about the secret life of data and compute moving to zero and the ghost of computing. Okay, what does that mean for work? What does that mean for what we're going to do? So, I want to introduce you to your new employees. This is one and Mr. Zero. Ones and zeros. Well, actually, it's not just two employees. It's a bunch of employees. A lot of them, right? Big data, lots and lots of information. We need to begin to think about data as an extension of ourselves and begin to think about data as your employee. You could actually put it to work. And many companies are, and I believe in the future as we're going forward, many more companies will begin to put data to work. But there's something that you need to do. As you all know as employers, if you've got these two employees, right, Ms. 1 and Mr. 0, all employees, or most employees, need a manager. Right? You need to have a manager. Well, that manager is something called an algorithm. So again, an algorithm is not really a big deal, right? An algorithm is simply a progressive series of calculations used to process and analyze large data sets. The algorithm is the thing that processes the big data. Now, as you have these employees, the thing that we need to do, and I work with the folks who actually write these algorithms, we need to train that algorithm. So as we begin to think about what we want to do with all this data, we actually need to think about how will it affect people. It's not just about efficiency. How do we actually make their lives better? How do we make them more efficient? How do we, literally in our technology, in the things that we build, have an understanding of what it means to be human? Because algorithms are written by people. Algorithms have a point of view. And I argue that it needs to have a very specific point of view. And I'll give you an example of what that is. I often at WORKTECH get myself in trouble when I say things like this in Intel Legal, and I know I'm being filmed. Hi everybody. Things like, you're the guy from Intel who put up the slide that says people versus machines. Yeah, I'm that guy. So, the thing that we need to remember though is that people are good at some things, machines are good at other things. People are serial. Multitasking is a myth, right? It's just rapid unitasking. Multitasking is a myth. What humans are really good at is serial. We do something, we come to an end. We do something, we come to an end. This is good. This is actually, doing that in work is a very, very good thing, right? We trust people, right? Because we can talk to people. People are very good at tasks. What computers are very good at are doing things in parallel. They're actually not, it's not terribly efficient to have a computer do a task and stop, do a task and then stop. If you really want to harness what machines are really good at, it's this massive processing, right? That's where that algorithm comes in. And for me, as I begin to kind of model these worlds, which is kind of what I need to do for Intel, is I always focus on balance, right? Understanding what machines do well, what computational power does well, and understanding what people do really well, right? And being able to put that into what we want to build. So as I wrap up, right, I know I'm the tech guy who always talks about, you know, machines and computational intelligence and science fiction. I am here to tell you that there's something very important. That in the year 2022, there's still something that a computer cannot do. I love computers, and it can't do it. Now, what I mean by this is still, in the year 2022, a computer will not be able to clean a toilet. So what I find interesting, though, is that in 2022, you will have computers that will be journalists. We have it today. We will also have computers that are surgeons. We have that today. Right? If you are having spinal surgery, there's robotics and computers that will actually work on your back. By the way, you want them to, because they're much better than the human hand. You have journalists who, you have algorithms that are actually now writing sports stories. So it's very possible that some of the stories in your local papers, or rather in your local websites, if you're for your children's Little League games, were actually written by computers. Again, this is a good thing, because a lot of times you didn't have the local sports reporter sitting down there and doing little Janie or little Johnny's sort of triple play at T-ball, right? That's a good thing. But we also have to remember that still, in 2022, there will be jobs that only humans can do. And so what I find interesting, and this is how I challenge myself and keep myself honest, is to say, what do we value? Right? Because right now, if I told you, would you want to be a janitor, a journalist, or a surgeon? My guess is you wouldn't pick janitor. But in some of these visions that we're talking about, a janitor might have a lot more job security. Now again, I'm not coaching you all to become janitors. That's not what I mean. But I've done it. It's not actually that bad. But what I want to challenge you is what these efficiencies are going to bring to us is a radical kind of reimagining of what we value, what we support, how we train, how we think about what we do. And this is where science fiction comes in. So we started doing some work. This was one that we did in Germany about 2 years ago. And if you search the Tomorrow Project online, you actually can download this all for free. All the Tomorrow Project work that we do is all for free. And the thing that happens here is that Douglas Rushkoff, who was the writer of this thing, The Last Day of Work, he actually used science fiction to examine the nature of work. And very much got me thinking about, as we use technology, as we think of all this amazing stuff that we can do, the thing that we always have to remember, kind of reflecting back even to the speakers said this morning, is don't forget about the humans. I embrace technology. I think it's going to be awesome when we can do all this great stuff, but we can't forget about the humans. So my last slide is my most important slide. When I was coming up in industry, I always used to write speeches. One of my speechwriters always had me in all of his PowerPoints, always have a picture of dogs playing poker. I was young, I didn't question why, I just did it. I said, fine, yes sir. Finally, when we were moving apart from each other, I finally asked him, I said, sir, why did I have to include a picture of dogs playing poker in everything that we did? And he said, Brian, everybody loves a picture of dogs playing poker. Why wouldn't you do that? So I've carried on that tradition. But I don't use pictures of dogs playing poker, but in all of my presentations, I do use pictures of animals using technology. Thank you very much.